When it comes to an at-risk population, I would say teenagers are the most when it comes to circadian rhythm disruption. Teenagers have a lot of social pressure to be on their phones, communicating, and a lot of them also enjoy staying up late, playing video games, and watching television. Today, I have Daniel White on the podcast as a returning guest. We're going to talk about a really exceptional study that he did in his hometown that took blue light blocking glasses and showed that adherence to just wearing the yellow blue blockers was able to improve mood, was able to improve self regulation, and even better grades for these teens. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode if you have a friend or family member that has a teenager or is a teenager. And I also want to announce a really exciting challenge that Daniel is doing. There will be a link down in the show notes if you want to follow along. This is called the Circadian Rhythm Disruption Challenge, and it starts on October the 20th. So head down to the show notes to sign up for the challenge, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Cortisol is a big buzzword these days, and I have made several videos to talk about this topic. But here's the thing: cortisol is supposed to be nice and high in the morning and then drop gradually throughout the day. And so when people talk about high cortisol being the root cause of weight gain, insomnia, and hormone imbalance, there is a bit of truth to that. But if you don't actually test your cortisol to see what it's doing throughout the day, you don't really know what's going on. And if you take an adaptogen to lower cortisol and it's not actually high, you could have unpleasant results. That's why I am partnering with SiPhox Health to give you an at-home cortisol test that you take throughout the day so you can see what's it doing in the morning, what's it doing midday, and what's it doing again in the evening when it's supposed to be nice and low so that you can get good sleep and have optimal metabolism. If you go to SiPhoxHealth.com/Sarah, you can save 20% on your at-home cortisol test. They also have an at-home blood test where you can test over 17 different biomarkers. Again, you'll go to SiPhox, SiPhox health.com/Sarah to save 20% off. When it comes to your cortisol, when it comes to your hormones, test and don't guess. Today's show is brought to you by Upgraded Formulas. They have my absolute favorite magnesium. You can get the best and only clinically studied stabilized nano magnesium supplement on the market from Upgraded Formulas using my code YOGI for 10% off. Did you know that magnesium is actually required for over 800 enzymatic reactions in the body? This clinically studied magnesium has proven to improve sleep quality and energy by over 60%, specifically improving light sleep measurement by 90%, REM sleep by 150%, and deep sleep by 250%. That means more energy, better mood, and deeper sleep. Who doesn't want that? What makes this the best on the market? This specific magnesium is nano magnesium, which means it is easier for your body to absorb and use. In fact, it is absorbed up to 99.99%, which means you'll feel the results instantaneously. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, I have a returning guest and friend, Daniel White, here on the show. Daniel, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. This is my second invitation to the show, and I am looking forward to this one more than the first.
Aw. Yeah, and we'll link the first episode that we did together. That was maybe a year ago. I'm not sure. Um,
About two, I think. If you
two.
can believe
Wow.
that.
Wow. Okay. Well, the reason why we were had you on the first time, maybe we could talk about a little of that and your story and your initiative, and then this show we'll talk more how that's evolved, and I think it's pretty interesting stuff. So let's roll.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great way for us to kind of segue in. I suppose the first time that we met to discuss this stuff about 2 years ago, I was in the processes of launching a charity and undertaking what I believe still was the first in the world of its kind research project where we were going into schools and we were delivering quantum and circadian health education, along with blue light blocking glasses many of your viewers will be familiar with the amber or the red lenses. And so that's what our charity was doing. And I went into schools in the beginning of 2023, in January time, and we had a cohort of about 500 students from the island I live in Guernsey, in the Channel Islands in the United Kingdom. And we segmented these students into 4 groups. In the first group, we gave them blue light blocking glasses, and we said, wear these things religiously 3 hours before bed every night. The second group of children, we did the same, but we also provided some circadian and quantum health education, just so, simple stuff around circadian rhythms, light exposure, temperature, building morning and evening routines, helping them to regulate stress and consider caffeine intake. They're kind of, the 101 when it comes to good sleep and circadian health. The third group, we just gave the education without the glasses, and then we had a control or a waitlist group. So the last time we spoke, we were in the process of setting that study up, and now we've completed that study, and we're going to be publishing a report on it in the next couple of weeks. So it is a very righteous time for me to be here talking about it with you again.
Yeah, I'm excited. And this is really, I have a lot of people in my community with teenagers, and it's a tough time. And that's really, I remember you speaking about when you saw your health really declining was teenager 20s, due to tech abuse, and I think it's becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger issue for kids, that they're just on their phones and they're doing all this gaming, up until all night long. And it's really impacting their health, their mental health, and their physical health, like, negatively. And so that's kind of how you even got into this work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was the poster boy for circadian rhythm disruption. So I've turned 30 now, but about 17, I suppose, it's going back a long time now, but 17 years ago, when I was 13 years old, I got into video gaming. There was a little bit of a bullying going on in school. And so I found solace in, massive multiplayer online video games, which comes with obviously a lot of exposure to technology. And that went from, an hour in the evening hobby to, gradually more and more hours spent in front of screens later and later at night. And, my circadian and all other aspects of my health really were decimated by that. Over a period of two or 3 years, I gained 5 or 6 stone weight. I don't know what that is quite in pounds, but it's a lot. I
Yeah.
was weighing about 110 kilos at the age of 16 or 17, and that's because I was awake until 3, 4 a.m. most nights. Probably 2 a.m. was an early night for me. I'm staring at brightly lit LED screens. Obviously so much blue light toxicity as a result of that. Fatigue, mood issues, anxiety, depression at points. When I tried to detox from that situation, feelings of suicidality. And so at that time, almost a decade and a half ago, I was the only child I knew who was that deeply addicted to technology, and whose rhythms were so disrupted as a result. But now all we have to do is look around at our
Yeah, it's
families and
everywhere.
friends, society. Delivering that research project and going into those schools, I got to see firsthand, like, just how staggering this problem is. I was in a hall of 400 children. You got about a quarter of them on the left-hand side are completely asleep. This is at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You got
Mm.
the middle group who are all like yawning and wanting to go to sleep. And then there's probably about like 25 kids who genuinely look, well rested and engaged and attentive. So I can only imagine that, when you look at that at scale across the world globally, not just the Channel Islands, not just the UK, but, the US, all these westernized countries, especially, where there is such, an agenda for people to be engaging and using technology applications, gaming, work, entertainment, leisure, most things that we do these days, sadly, take part in front of a screen. So the question is, with the genie being out of the bottle, what can we do about that? How can we equip those next generations of children in particular? That's my passion, so that they can resolve, the challenges and the issues that we face as humanity moving forward, because they're well rested, because they can think straight, and because they have better opportunities than I had at that age, because of something that I had no awareness of.
Yeah.
Nobody was teaching me that blue light is toxic, that it's destroying my sleep and causing me to gain weight and, develop mood issues and not be able to focus and concentrate and exhibit ADHD symptoms and, everything else, the cluster of things that I was experiencing because of it.
Yeah. And I think that most parents, most people on the whole, still have no idea the impact of light, zero, and how that can correlate with obesity, autoimmune conditions, infertility, Alzheimer's, ADHD, mood, depression, anxiety, insomnia, all of these things that people are suffering with constantly. Most people would never, you mentioned looking at your light environment and they're just kind of like, uh, like eyes go and roll into the back of the head. Like people are just very, I think still closed off to it, which is why I absolutely love what you've done and your work, because you've actually been able to show that these teens, by using blue light blocking glasses, have been able to show improvements across the board in their health and in their attention and their energy, all of those things, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're to touch on the results of the study. So the first group that we delivered blue light blocking glasses to, they saw improvements across all the factors that we measured when it came to sleep. So whether it was, stress and anxiety before bedtime, next day alertness levels, their sleep quality, their sleep consistency. And we saw that also, as you might expect, in the group that received education and glasses. And we saw it to a lesser extent in the group that only received education, but it just shows how like tangible and practical and, widely accepted this information is to a younger generation. I've struggled throughout a lot of my career to, convince some adults, usually people close to me, that this stuff is important, that we can change our ways, that we can reconsider, our behaviors and our lifestyle in the container of all the information that we already have in relation to diet and exercise and, all those things which are obviously important aspects and facets of our well-being, but that perhaps, the lowest hanging fruit, the simplest thing that we could all address that would have, a robust impact on all of these other areas that we're trying so hard to manage when it comes to our health and well-being is just our light environment and is
Mm-hmm.
our lifestyle behaviors as it pertains to our circadian rhythms and helping us to feel energized and alert in the morning or to wind down at night. It's usually we're doing so much, we're like pushing a heavy boulder up the hill, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like it's once you really dial this in, it's amazing how much better that you feel. It's amazing how much more optimally your brain operates and your metabolism, all of that. It works better. And so with a child, a teenager, the brain is still rapidly developing. And you have to think about like, what is that doing? What is that doing to our society? Because these kids are going to not be teenagers. They're going to grow up and become like adults that have to function in the world. Um, what is that going to look like? Because it's like mental health issues continue to skyrocket in the younger generation. And it's just like, just to think that these things are not linked to have this um, inappropriate light exposure is not linked to all of these issues is just silly. Everyone wants to blame the food. And I definitely think, you and I both see similarly about food and that we should eat local, seasonal, nutrient dense foods, but uh, we got to go further. It's not just food. It's this whole other aspect of things that are affecting these kids, right?
Yeah, and I think, what's being very clear to me over the development of these interventions and the thousands of conversations that I've had over the years is that food is a very emotive subject.
Mm-hmm.
We eat for
Mm-hmm.
spiritual reasons, we eat for hedonistic reasons, we eat for nutritional reasons, and
Mm-hmm.
children primarily eat for hedonistic reasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes food can be a weapon of control against parents or its accessibility within a school environment, or, there's so many factors that influence that. And obviously that impacts our health. But when it comes to our light environment, the impacts of making amends to your light environment, whether it's spending more time outdoors in the day or blocking, filtering, lowering, reducing light at night, those impacts are instantaneous. And it's not like, oh, well, I don't get the hedonistic enjoyment of that type of light exposure in the evening because it doesn't make you feel good. As soon as you
Right.
begin to make changes to the light environment, you feel better. And that's why
Yeah.
children, from what I've seen, are so quick to adopt these changes. And they just, they get it. Unlike adults, where we're, stuck in the trenches of our behavior for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. Um, this information seems to be uptaken by children a lot quicker and easier. And, our mission, I guess, moving forward now has been from understanding that, we can create an intervention that is, replicable, we can get great
Mhm.
results from, but it's now about moving this from the 0.1 to 1% of people that know about it and doing as much as we can to put a dent in the universe through impacting the 99.9% who have no awareness. Because if we want, a future and to live in societies that are healthier, happier, with children that are more intuitive, creative, problem solving, have better health, mentally and physically, um, we need to be able to spread and help that information to become adopted at mass, and create a
Hmm.
bridge between this world, which is, the circadian and quantum world, which, we exist within. And there's so much amazing information we can geek out for days and years. And there's so many things we don't even know yet. But it's about, what's the bridge of translation into academia, into institutions, into places where, that 99% of the population, they live and they work and they, deserve to access the same level of health and information that we do. So, we hope that we can now start to take it in a direction of, demonstrating how simple a lot of this stuff is at scale.
Hmm. Yeah, because you've shown it, like you said, in a very microcosm sort of a way that even just yellow blue blockers, when these kids are adhering to that, that they are seeing improvements across the board. So how can we get this out to a larger scale audience, right?
Yeah, and that's really been like where we're turning now with our mission, because a lot of this stuff as well is super scalable. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I won't divulge to anybody here the real cost of a pair of blue light blocking glasses from a distributor, because I'm sure I'd upset a lot of our friends who have blue light blocking companies. But the fact is, it's not that expensive.
Mm-mm.
If governments, if companies, if institutions, if organizations wanted to make investments into equipment and education that could, fundamentally transform the way in which their staff, their children, families, caregivers live their lives, it's not like it's going to be unaffordable. It's just
Right.
about demonstrating how simply that can be scaled and delivered to people, which is what we're hoping to now do in the next stages.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, and I'll have people buy a cheap pair of Spectra 479 on Amazon if they're super skeptical, because I have my fancy blue blockers that are really comfortable and nice and high end. But then also, like, you get the same benefits from a cheap pair. You just want to scratch them up because then they won't work as well. But they're not, they're not like, they shouldn't break the bank, right? And you can see benefits from, like I said, even just using the yellow ones after sunset, because you didn't even use red ones, did you, in this cohort?
No, so we partnered with, and a big shout out to Rudy and Viva Rays. So they provided us with their proprietary lens technology, which is an amber lens. It's a little bit of a darker
Mm,
amber lens to some of the other ones that are
the
available.
sunset.
So it
Yeah.
so it is really effective, but it's not, as deep as the deep red,
Red.
which can
Yeah.
obviously, cause some issues in terms of adherence for some people.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you can't really see it. I was wearing my red. I always tell a story of like being 9 months pregnant. I was wearing my red Viva Rays. And I fell down the stairs. My husband was like, "That's it. I'm done with this blue blocking stuff. It's gonna hurt the baby." He was so upset. And so I was like, "All right, I won't wear my red ones like walking around anymore." So I typically won't wear, I'll wear the sunset lenses. I've got the Viva Rays that are more orange tinted until I know I'm like sitting for the night, because it is kind of difficult to see with the red. And I don't feel like that visceral like ugh, from blue light exposure if I have the sunset lenses on. So I think those can be super helpful for people. And like you said, with adherence, because if they want to watch their TV or like play video games or be on their phone, they're still going to get a layer of protection, right?
Yeah, and that's it. And this is a really good segue into how we're now looking at delivering a lot of this education, because the truth is, in a population, so let's say the 99%, and we make that 100% of the 99%, within that 100% of people, there will be 20% who will be willing to wear red. There will
Mm-hmm.
be 30% who will be willing to wear amber, and there'll be 50% who are not willing to spend a penny on this until they
Mm-hmm.
feel some impact. And so when we approach this education now, we really stagger it and we say that, it's about like depths of engagement. Because if we're talking about wavelengths of light, the
Mm-hmm.
cooler, shorter wavelengths being more stimulating for the circadian system, but we're also demonstrating that lux or brightness or luminosity
Yes.
intensity of light is important, then
Yes.
just dimming the light on your phone, dimming the light on the television, not turning on the overhead lights, using things below eye level. That's step one.
Hmm.
Anyone can do that. That's free.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then, there's all these applications, be it Flux or Iris or, block blue light for Android and, settings that you can change in your iPhone. Those things are very low cost, if not free.
Yep.
Then
Yeah.
you can get blue light blocking glasses. And the truth is, there's Spectra, I don't know, the brand that you mentioned, but
479 are the Amazon
479.
ones. Yeah.
So those are super cheap. I've seen some that are even cheaper than that. And then, you
Mm.
can go up into brands, Block Blue Light, Bond Charge, Viva Rays, RA Optics. They're all fantastic glasses, right? But,
Yeah.
you can make that
Yeah.
decision and it shouldn't cost you the earth. It should be accessible. And then
Right.
beyond that, and maybe a little bit as to what you're talking to, I don't tend to wear the red glasses a lot in the evenings because I have no blue light in
Oh.
my environment.
Yeah, I don't
Because
really either.
if I've got a screen on the laptop, it's filtered. If I've got a bulb in my, bedroom, my daughter's bedroom, it's red.
Hmm.
So there's layers of engagement, and that's another thing that I think is super important for people outside of the quantum space or who are quantum or circadian curious to know is that like you don't have to go all in
All the
to
way.
see
Yeah.
an effect.
Yeah. I mean, my husband says that we live like vampires because we don't have like we just don't turn lights on in the house. And then if someone does, then I'm like, ah, like we have all these like high ceilings and we've got can lights in the ceilings, and everyone's like, well, what did you do? What light bulbs did you put in your can lights? I'm like, I haven't changed those out because we never even turn them on. And there's never really a reason to. Like if I'm going to clean the house, then I might turn them on just to make sure I get all the dirt, like once a week. But like honest, and that'll be in the middle of the day. So I'm not super worried about it. But like I haven't gone through and done this like extensive like light bulb uh rejuvenation in my house because we just really don't turn them on. We have red light panels that we'll put on the floor to light up the bedroom at night if we need to be up past sunset doing stuff. Like we've just adapted our lifestyle that way. I've got infrared Edison style bulbs in lamps that I'll turn on. The lamps are lower to the floor like if we need to turn on a lamp. It doesn't have to be super complicated because that's the first thing I'll get with people. They're like, okay, I need to change out all my light bulbs. And I'm like, hey, just don't turn them on. Like don't be so reliant on your light bulbs all the time. Like, and your eyes do adjust. Like, that's one interesting thing about blue light toxicity. Um, if you're blue light toxic, you're going to have a level of night blindness. And that's one of the big signs that you have some blue light toxicity is night blindness. And that can also be because the blue light has caused the retinol to uncouple in the eye. And you have probably the vitamin A in your eye has been destroyed. Not to say it can't be rebuilt. Our body can be regenerated, but that's another thing with people, when they start this lifestyle, a lot of them are very blue light toxic. And so, your body will adjust as you do these things. You just have to
Mm.
give it a chance, right?
And that was some of the best feedback that we received, although somewhat ironic, from
Mm.
the children who took part in our study. I say children, these were teenagers aged 13 up to 21, really. But we got a couple of messages from people, as you do, oh, my glasses broke. I stood on them. I sat on them. And I
Mm.
can't bear looking at lights in the evening now. Do you have any more
Yeah,
glasses? Because
I
all it
love
takes
it.
is, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. In the case of this study, 4 weeks. Of children using them, not necessarily every day. I doubt they're taking them out to, leisure time with their friends at the weekends or to the movie
Yeah.
theater. Maybe not as hardcore as us.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like even the majority of the time, using those glasses, you begin to develop a real sensitivity to blue light, which
Yeah.
makes existing in a blue light toxic world more difficult. But it is, a necessary step towards like a slow, gradual, snowballing adoption of this information, within society, because we have the early adopters, the people who came into part in our research study with the early adopters. And guess what happened 6 months later? We had schools contacting us. Oh, we've got 40 students that didn't participate that wish that they had. When will you be running this again? When can we access these? Because you're always going to have that, key number of people who are ready to be inspirational and to hold the torch and to
Hmm.
walk forward. And then that's when, the real experiences that people are having, the testimonials, the reviews, the anecdotes begin to, trickle into society, culture, community, and things do change. But it takes time, and it takes, those people who will be willing to be brave and curious and courageous and, stepping out first.
A lot of people are quick to talk about the benefits of sunlight, but what gets often missed in the conversation is the benefit of darkness and the importance of protecting yourself from blue and green light after sunset. That is why I choose Viva Rays as my go to source for protecting my circadian rhythms. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% off at Viva Rays. Now, you may have seen some of these studies popping up. I call them fear mongering about blue blockers not being effective. And that is a partial truth because when you use blue blockers that are clear or that have not been tested with a spectrometer to actually block what they say they do, they will not protect your circadian rhythms and they are not catching those key wavelengths that you need to be blocking in order for your body to be able to repair, for you to make melatonin, which is a master antioxidant. And artificial light at night has been in the scientific literature extensively linked to a host of hormonal cancers, obesity, diabetes, and all sorts of metabolic issues. That again is why I choose Viva Rays as my go to source for protecting my circadian rhythms to allow my body to get adequate darkness at night. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% over at Viva Rays, and you can actually trust that they block the frequencies of light that they say they do. Thanks to Viva Rays for sponsoring today's podcast. Yeah, that's why I love what you're doing and just bringing this to the forefront because it's not like you're asking people to change their diet. You're not even telling them they have to like put their phones down at night or not watch TV, not enjoy a show that they like. You're just saying put on a pair of glasses. And just from doing that, you're seeing major improvements across the board, right?
Yeah, and it's like I always say, you know, if you were to sleep 20% better and you had 20% more energy and you had, even 20% less cravings, or, you could
Mm-hmm.
be 20% more focused in your life or more engaged with the things that you love. What is the snowball impact of that into trickle
Mm-hmm.
down into every area of not just your life, but like your community, your family, like your society? Ultimately, changing diet can be quite challenging for people.
Mm-hmm.
We know there are
Mm-hmm.
so many factors, from hedonistic to neurological to gut microbiota to access to food, all of these sorts of
Mm-hmm.
things. Same with exercise routines, the
Mm-hmm.
same with managing stress. But what is the one thing that we know will give you the foot up, in all of those areas? And it's having well-attuned circadian rhythms. It's living in rhythm with nature, and it's being able
Mm-hmm.
to, truly thrive as a result of, your genes, your cells, every system, organ in the body, knowing what it should be doing, the
Yeah.
basis of all life.
Yeah. And that's the thing I always tell people. I'm like, start with light because I have a really big, long nutrition background, lots of I have collected nutrition certifications over the years. And like that's what we do because I think a lot of people start with food because it's an easy thing to manipulate, quote unquote, other than the other all that other stuff you just mentioned. That's the roadblocks you run into. Um, but this makes it easier. Like I find with people, I'm like, let's start with light because when your cortisol melatonin patterns are regulated, your leptin is also going to be somewhat better regulated as well because leptin and melatonin, they peak. They're supposed to peak at the same exact time at night, right? And there's a correlation there. And in the morning, when your cortisol is regulated, leptin should be at its lowest. And so that's going to greatly impact your appetite and your energy metabolism. Is going to impact your thyroid. And then getting light exposure, sunlight exposure also can help to serve as like a natural adaptogen for your appetite via POMC. And so it's so much easier just to help people start here. And then I think a lot of people find once they get these cycles regulated, that making the dietary changes that they want to make is just so much easier, so much more attainable. And because you've got your hormones more on your side, would you say?
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And something that's coming up for me listening to you talk about this is just one word, and it's self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
As a teenager, I was not able to self-regulate. I wasn't
Yeah,
able to
same.
self-regulate my eating, my behavior, my relationships. my studying, my focus, my attention, all of these things. And so, as we said, there are more pieces to the picture and the puzzle than just light alone, but the right light environment and the correct circadian rhythmicity is like a step in the direction of better self-regulation. And so if we
Yes.
know that, self-regulation is a challenge, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it because you
Hmm.
can't regulate yourself in the evening that you have to watch Netflix until 12 o'clock at night? Is that why your circadian
Right.
disrupted? Or
Yes.
the circadian disruption causes the inability to regulate ourselves when it comes to, late night eating and late night behaviors. And so it's just an entire cycle and circle. And
Hmm.
as a teenager and as a young adult, like I was so locked into that. And
Hmm.
one thing that is also coming up for me is, that more recently, things like intuition, my
Mm.
sense of spirituality, my sense of self
Mm.
in the greater place of things in life has come more online. When I was a
Mhm.
teenager, I was very selfish. You might even say like somewhat narcissistic, because all I could do was think about what I needed, how I needed to fill the gaps in my neurology, my dopamine, my reward motivation based on, caffeine, based on drugs, based on light, based on games. Everything is
Yeah.
neurochemical at the end of the day. So if you're not able to naturally regulate yourself, you're always going to seek some sort of unsustainable behavior to do that.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, the worst thing that I see in teenagers is that, and I think, we don't recognize it because we talk a lot about addiction in terms of, alcohol and substance use, but I don't think people realize how pervasive like the addiction to social media is,
Oh
for
my God,
for
it's
children
terrible.
and
Yeah.
technology and um, sadly, in those circumstances, children can't think creatively and they can't
No.
communicate with each other. And we're in a
No.
world now that faces a lot of challenges. And, it's the greatest aspiration that we have as a group now working on these projects is that, you know, future generations of children will be inspired to resolve these challenges. And they will do so because they think in decentralized ways.
Yes.
They have their health.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I think about all the time. It's my son is not even 2 yet. Uh, but and I have a daughter, of course, but she's not really in that realm. We have a whole set of other stuff with her. But my son, I'm just like, God, what is going to happen with these little babies? Like growing up in this digital world, everything is so highly reliant on digital. And, how can I help his brain develop? How can I help him be healthy in this world? Yeah, I'm going to feed him the best foods possible. I've done that since day one, but how can I allow him to be successful in the world? Because he's going to have to learn how to use technology, but not let it consume him the way I see. When you go out now, you see all the kids like looking down on their phones. And I'm just like, that's so different from how I grew up. I mean, I grew up in a different generation where the video games we had were like Nintendo and Sonic. They were not even all that.
The golden
They were
days.
not that the olden days, yeah, Zelda. And I would play those for hours on end. Like I definitely would try to beat Zelda. But we also would leave the house in the morning and go off on our bikes and go out and on adventures in the woods. And the only way our friends could get in touch with us was like they call on the landline and got to talk to our parents, like, oh, is Sarah there? It's just a different time. I'm so grateful that that's the way that I got to grow up. Um, and I just like think about the health problems that a lot of these children are having these days and like how can I support my son so he's able to live in the real world, but also not let this new way that the kids are living like destroy his life because I see it, and it's just scary. You want the best for your kids.
No, absolutely. And I see huge changes in my daughter's mood and behavior depending on the environment that she's in.
Yeah.
When she stays at my house and it's, red lights in the evening, no television close to bedtime, it's, 10,
Hmm.
11 hours sleep, just as it
Yeah.
should be. And I
Yeah.
think one of the challenges we have, and like a bone of contention I have to pick, with people who make this argument is that within schools, and I get it, I understand, teachers, caregivers, parents, they're at their loose end a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
becomes well, you as a parent, you don't have the the courage or the follow through to, restrict your children's access, or to force your
Mhm.
children to go outside.
Mhm.
Just take their devices away, banish them to the outdoors like we would have been when we were kids. Um, but I think this is a little bit similar to, like, the argument that's made by big powers when it comes down to nutrition, like, ah, the world and global warming or climate catastrophe is caused by your individual food choices. It's your inability to manage your children that are causing this problem. And we know that that's not true. You only have to zoom out
Right.
a couple of feet to see that, every child is being institutionalized,
Yes.
and it's the, the governing beliefs and the dogma of
Mhm.
those institutions which are setting us up for the circumstances through which we have to deal with, which is why I'm so passionate about infiltrating those places with a
Mm.
language that they understand. Because I've already had a lot of conversations with teachers in these schools, and they've said, well, blocking blue light at night, that seems like really clever. And then we've started to think about, could we hold our maths class outside? Could we take
Mhm.
geography outside? Or, could we say
Mhm.
to the kids, we're all going to go outside and do this thing? Can we all leave our mobile phones in the classroom? And so it's not about shoving the genie back into the bottle and being there like, you can't have
Right.
that thing. I don't know about you, but as a child, anything that my parents told me I couldn't have, I put up instant resist. I was ready to fight.
Oh, really? That's a novel idea.
Yeah.
I can't have that. Like, I'm gonna go harder on it now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, just, a cultural inception of the idea that, we can do both. We can be
Mhm.
gamers,
Mhm.
we can stare into screens for a few hours a day. Maybe, we use some blue light blocking glasses or screen filters. But we can counterbalance that with time spent outside
Outside.
in the real world, because we have a knowledge and appreciation of how fundamental that is for our health and our
Yeah.
happiness. And, you know, if you catch a child at the right time and you infiltrate them with that knowledge, as I've seen in, many very conscious parents that I've had the pleasure of working with or being friends with, um, you have a wise soul at the age of
Mhm.
10 or 11.
Mhm.
You have a
Mhm.
child that's never going to want to do all of one or all of the other, because they appreciate the interconnectedness,
Mm.
and the accessibility and what technology can do at the same time as what nature brings.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, this is only the beginning, right? I think the more that people wake up to this stuff, the more they start to ask bigger questions about, like, our environments, our school environments. And there was incredible work done. I don't know if it was John Ott or
John Ott. That's who I was
someone
about to bring
similar.
up with the kids
Yeah,
and the lights. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Health and
like
light.
kids and lights in school. And
Mhm.
obviously, having spoken with Dr. Martin Moreed at length, and, like, gone really deep into his work, the problem is cultural, the problem is industrial. you know Maybe if the Nobel Prize for circadian rhythmicity had come before that of the LED chip, we might be in a bit of a different position as it pertains to, like, the lighting industry and, the billions of dollars of lighting that's accessible and readily sold to people every day. And it's going
Mm.
to take time to shift all of that. But I truly believe that, number one, we have to
Yeah.
try. I
Yeah.
don't want to be on my deathbed and think to myself, well, I knew all of that stuff and I never tried to make it more mainstream, or I never tried to help to wake people up. I think there's a quote, which is that, if I love you, I must make you conscious. And
Yes.
that's what we're doing here.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And, I think educating the teachers is crucial, and the administrators. My sister is a elementary school teacher, and I kind of showed her the John Ott Health and Light uh, YouTube. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. And she immediately was like, whoa. And she changed her classroom around. So now she's got, because I've got in my office, obviously I have a nasty blue light shining at me, but when that's off and I'm not filming, I got this little infrared light in a bulb, and I open my window that's behind me and put an iris on my computer. So my sister's made similar changes in her classroom where she's got lamps and infrared bulbs, and we're in Georgia, 33rd latitude. So we can open the windows a good amount of the time, and her school allows her to do that. And same thing at my daughter's school, because my daughter, she's very highly sensitive, and she actually, lights flicker, lights, fluorescent lights, LED lights, they flicker. And I've always felt kind of nauseous around those big bright lights. But my daughter actually, when she spells on her letterboard, she's like, I can't I can't focus because the lights are too loud. Like they're really, really, really loud. Like so she can hear like the buzzing of those lights. And so
Mm.
in her classroom, they've adapted it with lamps, window, like they don't turn on those lights because she's expressed multiple times that she can't hear anybody talking in the room when those lights are on. And so, and she's like I said, she's the canary in the coal mine. She's super sensitive to these things. And so, just looking at the environment we're putting our kids in during the day also, and maybe providing some help, resources, and education around that. And my sister sees with her elementary school kids a dramatic difference from doing the lamps and the windows open, just like you, just like the kids, they're all amped up and crazy when they come in the room and they just kind of like, they're able to sit and just chill as much as a 6 7 year old can, but it's she's noticed a remarkable difference. And I have ladies in my community that have done my leptin reset. Some of the ladies, just to go off on a little tangent, that really struggle with their health are my school teachers. I had one school teacher that had crippling anxiety, and she was like, I want to do your program, but I'm a teacher, I don't know how I can make this work. And we really just dialed it in. If you get to school before sun's up, you're wearing your yellow blue blockers, you've already eaten some breakfast, and then you take a light break, you go outside at sunrise. She takes these little breaks, she opens the windows, she changed out the bulbs in the room, and then did all the other stuff. And she's like the ambassador for my group now. When a new person comes in, she's just like, no, this is what you do. Like she just like is really embraced the information, and she's had dramatic shift in her health and no longer suffers with crippling insomnia or crippling anxiety. And it's just like, yeah, the biggest thing we did change nutrition and some other things, but like the light was primary for her. And you think about how sensitive that our kids are and developing brains. And it's just so important that we get this information out to people, because I don't think they know how it's impacting their health.
Yeah, and I think my favorite thing about that story that you just told is neatly summed up in a quote. I can't remember who said it. In fact, it might have been us who said it. And that's that transformed people transform people.
I love that.
So
Yes.
that, like, yourself or myself alone, so we're never going to reach everybody, you know,
Right.
if
Right.
it's possible even for everyone to be reached. But ultimately,
Right.
those waves of momentum, provided to people through
Will
simple,
trickle out.
easy to digest, lifestyle changes in the form of like interventions that don't cost the earth and that don't confuse people and that don't take people too far down the rabbit hole. Because of course, there's a lot of people out there who don't want to know the finer intricacies
Right.
of the circadian
Right.
and quantum health stuff. They just want to know how to practically, tangibly make changes
How do
that
I
make them
feel
feel
better?
better, that how they stress less, how are their children happier, their parents happier, how do they age better, you know, that, my friend, is a fine art.
Hmm.
And to
Yeah.
incubate people who can then incubate other people is the
Yeah.
greatest joy for me.
And the more people that we have talking about this, the better. Um, I love the current quantum circadian community of people because I think that we all are really supportive of one another. There's not really like a lot of competition, if you will. I think we're all just like, hey, someone's going to hear you talk and totally relate to your cadence, like they're just going to resonate with you. Someone's going to hear it from me and be a totally different person to resonate with me. My partner Carrie Bennett, like someone might need to hear it from her and go deep into the science and get a PhD level sort of a explanation for things, or a different person might get really confused by that and need it to just be simple. And so the more of us that are talking about this, and that we get other people like the teachers and the administrators and then the other children to talk about it, yeah, it's going to have this trickle out effect. And that's where we make change, I think.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's, the idea is, I think the saying is horses for courses, right? There'll be some people
Hmm.
that need to digest that information in different ways. And what I love about, as you mentioned, the circadian and quantum health community is that it seems to be a rather abundant mindset that people in this
Hmm.
community adopt. And perhaps that's because, spiritually, their connection with themselves is much better.
Yes.
and enhanced as a result of living the way that human beings are supposed to, knowing what it truly means to be a human being as a result of, living in rhythm with nature.
Absolutely.
Maybe that segues us into talking about this amazing, cool,
Yes.
incredible thing, which could potentially touch the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Cool. So, as a result of the research that we developed last year, we had a charity. The charity was called Sleep Better, Live Better, and I met some incredible partners. Two people named Avi and Lauren, who are part of something called Kintsugi Coaching, and another guy called Jeff, who founded something called the lightenvironment.org. And we got together over the last 6 months and we decided to generate a challenge, something a little bit akin to, if you remember the ASL Ice Bucket Challenge. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
So, that challenge, obviously, it was a lot of fun. People pour ice on their heads, but we did a little bit of digging into, virality and how to make education and challenges and information go viral. And we found out that that challenge had actually raised about 170 million pounds for ASL research.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Jeff, one of our partners, really inspired us with some ideas that made us come together and consider, what could we do from a circadian standpoint? What sort of challenge or virality could we generate that could maybe touch thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, who knows, maybe millions of lives. And we landed a couple of months ago on something that we're going to be launching very soon in October, which is called the CRD Challenge. So CRD stands for Circadian Rhythm Disruption. Something that, pretty much everybody can get down with. There's so much literature now, as you and I both know: anxiety, depression, obesity, diabetes, metabolic problems, neurological problems, behavioral problems, cancer. CRD touches every symptom, and it's implicated in every major disease. And even if you're not diseased and you want to feel better, you want to live with more vibrancy, more vitality, be more in tune, be more gentle, more intuitive, more creative, more energized, whatever, improving your circadian health is going to be phenomenal. So we landed on the CRD challenge, and in the last 3 or 4 months, we've developed this bite-sized 21-day learning journey, which we honestly believe has the potential to create a phenomenal wave of interest, curiosity, and impact in terms of people's circadian health. And so, as we've been preparing for the launch, we've been turning to people within the circadian quantum health spaces, also those who are circadian curious as well on the kind of outskirts. And we've been finding, like yourself, ambassadors and people who can help us to spread this cause and spread this mission, so that, first of all, we get this education and this experience into the hands of people globally. But secondly, that we might also, through that means, do some fundraising that will enable us to scale up the delivery of the educational interventions into more schools who can't afford it. Because the truth is, there is a lot of organizations and institutions out there who have got more than enough money and budget to deliver education and training within schools, but then there are just so many people out there who can't afford it. And in registering our charity a few years ago, my number one kind of agenda was that there will be no cost to consumer, zero cost to consumer for the most basic circadian and quantum health education. So that's what we're doing. We've been putting this together. We've been working very hard, and we're getting to the point where it's almost ready to go.
So exciting. So I definitely want to be involved in that and have people in my community be involved in that. If they want to, what are the steps that they need to take to get involved in the challenge?
Absolutely. So I'm not 100% sure when this podcast is going to be going out, but I would
Mm.
assume that everything is going to be probably live by that point. So you'll find us at thecrdchallenge.com. And you'll also find us at the CRD Challenge on Instagram at the moment. That's where we've housed ourselves. And so you'll visit the landing page and you'll find out about the challenge. Although we don't give all of the information away, we just kind of tell you, how you'd get started. And you come and sign up and you get involved in our free online school community where all the education is delivered. And it's just bite-sized learning videos each week. If I give you a tickle of interest into what it is, we begin with the fundamentals. So really looking at evening and morning light exposure. bringing people into a group and a community environment. So, they have accountability, they're able to ask questions and be supported. And they're also surrounded within that community by all of the other ambassadors. So, for those people who we find or who we recruit, which could be from anywhere, right? We're about to go public in a couple of newspapers. We're on your podcast. I've got people within schools, organizations, corporate clients who are interested. This is really going to be what I hope will be, one of the furthest reaching circadian interventions that's ever taken place publicly, at least for our first run. And we plan for it to get much bigger as the years go forward. But the beautiful thing about that is, it's an opportunity for people to also connect with and find, their tribe, to find their educator, the people that they resonate with, whether it's from the same, jurisdiction as them, the same country as them, or, the same age as them. We're bringing everybody together, those who are deeply steeped in the community, those who are curious, and those who, quite frankly, have no idea what this stuff is, under one roof, where we can make a seismic, wave or vibration that will spread out into the world.
I love it. Well, I'll make sure I have that linked in the show notes for people who want to get involved in that. I'll definitely be participating myself and putting it up on my social media, sending it out to my newsletter list. So more definitely to come from that. And I really love what you're doing, and I just appreciate this so much, Daniel. And I think it's gonna get out there. I think it's gonna get to the right people, and it's just a really exciting time to be involved. So thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today.
No, thank you so much, Sarah. You've always been in support of our work, and I'm so grateful for that. And I will actually just tell this little side story before we finish it up.
Yeah.
Um, the reason that I found my place within the team of incredible people that I'm now working with is because of the first podcast that you and I did.
Oh,
So,
how cool.
as a result of that podcast, I was approached by Avi and Lauren, two of my partners, and then we later found Jeff. And so, the whole underpinning of our new organization, which is going to be called Quantumly. So we will operate Quantumly as a business, and Quantumly Foundation as the
Love
foundation,
it.
which undertakes the educational research. It really was all made possible by the first appearance that I made on this podcast. So just want to thank you for
Aw.
that. And then secondly, yeah, I mean, I would just maybe leave on one thought or one note, and that's that, anybody can be an ambassador of this work.
Mm.
Obviously we've reached out to people who have a large following in the space and people that we know are very committed. But one thing that I've seen about awakening people in this sphere and gaining more of an understanding of the light environment and circadian health is that it kind of sets, or sparks a light within people that gives them a sense of purpose to share this information. So if anybody who's listening, perhaps you are a practitioner, perhaps you are, somebody you consider to be, general public, maybe you know a lot, maybe you don't know a lot, but you have people that you would like to influence, and you would like to be an ambassador for the CRD challenge, for the cause, and to spread, even a whisper that this sort of thing is taking part. We'll leave some information in the show notes, and people will know how to get in touch. So whether you want to participate or whether you want to help us to spread the good word about this on behalf of our charity and our mission, we would really appreciate it. And I can't thank you enough for having me on again to talk about it. There will be a part 3, and that will be
Yes.
in around 6 months' time, when we're sharing with you exactly what went down during the challenge.
Yay. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. And I always love chatting with you and connecting with you. So um, as always, until the next time, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Evolving Wellness podcast. Just a quick little reminder, this is not medical advice nor meant to be taken as a substitute for working one-on-one with a healthcare practitioner. And if you enjoy the show, please head on over to Apple or Spotify to leave the show up to a 5-star review. If you're over on YouTube, please leave us a like, leave us a comment. I really appreciate you for being here, for listening to the show, and your support means the world to me as I continue to try to pull guests from around the world to bring you informative content to empower you to make decisions about your own health. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.